SMART goals suck. They're all about the logic and they limit our ways of thinking and they limit our potential outcomes. It's time for us to update the SMART method so that you can much more easily and with more fun create the lifestyle that you really want. The truth is that trying to set SMART goals for myself was one of the main reasons that I just could not make any progress when I first started out in my business, and I didn't know why. I thought it was because I was useless, and I didn't realize that the SMART goals were actually causing me to put myself into an emotional state that didn't work. And if you know anything about creating the reality that you want, we have to create the energetics, the frequencies, the emotions to make that manifest. So let's just talk about why SMART goals don't work for most of us, especially if we're multi-passionate, if we're intuitive. SMART goals just don't sit with us. The first thing is that SMART goals are supposed to be specific. Now, here's the thing with that. We're just not that freaking clever as human beings, right? The infinite intelligence, the universal matrix, the quantum field, whatever you want to call it, has a myriad of outcomes waiting for you that are way better than you could consciously conjure up with your mind. Because you can only conjure up logical ways. You can only think about things that might work. You can't think of the miraculous outcomes because you don't have that capacity. So when we get so specific on what that outcome has to look like, we're actually closing the door on so many other ways that we could have an outcome better than that and probably easier than that. The second thing is that SMART goals talk about achievable and realistic. That's literally playing to our own limitations, to our own sort of self-limiting beliefs. Maybe it feels completely unachievable right now at your level of thinking, but if you only set a goal on what you thought was absolutely possible, you'd never try anything really massive. And so that's another reason why, for me, SMART goals are completely limiting. Now, we've also got time specific, and yes, setting a time is necessary for us to be able to break down our action steps, our 12-week plan, our 6-month plan, however you decide to do that. But at the same time, if we say it has to happen by then, and we lose faith because a week before things still haven't got to where we want it to go, we can actually just quit on ourselves. It may take us an extra 6 months, maybe for some an extra 6 years, maybe for some it happens way more quick. But again, the time specific can actually become a limitation rather than something that activates growth. There's two other key concepts to SMART goals that I realised were limiting for me, and I want to share them with you in case it lands with you as well. I've touched on this briefly before. When we start to set SMART goals, it can really start to activating our self-limiting beliefs. Well, I talk a lot about how our current identity has a level of expectation, and our expectations are often unconscious and they are birthed by our beliefs. So whatever our subconscious beliefs are says to us, hey, this is what's possible for you in your life, and this is how much you're prepared to do to go make that happen. In order for us to shift our reality, we have to shift our identity. And that means understanding what's going on in our minds so that we can reprogram it to get a better result. Now, if you're right at the start of this journey and you're working with somebody that's trying to get you to set SMART goals, and then it activates all the fear and anxiety of your self-limitations, and you don't know how to change that in your head, you're not getting off the starting blocks. And then it feeds back into the reason why you can't make this happen, because you are useless, or you don't know enough, or you don't deserve it, or you're not as clever as everybody else. So the second thing is, we know now that we make manifest, we create a reality based on our frequency. What that means is that each of us is going around vibrating a certain energy. A classic example is, if you walk into a room and nobody's speaking, you will know if somebody's had an argument in that room. If there's two people in there, you will feel the argument. If you've ever seen a grandparent with a young grandchild, the grandparent can be tired and lethargic and then wake up when their grandchild comes in. And when the grandchild leaves, the grandchild is normally exhausted because the grandparent's taken so much of the energy. We're aware of this all the time. So we get good vibes from people, we get bad vibes from other people, okay? So what creates that frequency? It's basically what you're thinking. What's going around in your mind is creating a frequency. So the very simple key to you creating a brand new, amazing, abundant reality is becoming aware of what's going on in your mind. Scarily, we know that up to 95% of our thoughts are the same every single day, with the majority of those being more negative in their bias. So if you can start to understand, oh, I hear this thing playing, let me change that to something more purposeful and more positive and optimistic, it'll all start to change. Now, SMART goals don't talk to us about feelings, they talk to us about things, and that creates a block. So I want to give you my 5 top tips to help you create the life that you want through goal setting in a whole new way. The first one is super simple. If you don't like the word goal, change it. Right? I never resonated with the word goal. And I was like, oh, again, there must be something wrong with me. It just doesn't light me up. The word goal doesn't activate me. Right? So I had to think about what do I want? And I much prefer the word dream or vision or desire or outcome. So that the first step is, if goal doesn't resonate, find a word that it lights you up a little bit more, that makes it much more likely that you're going to activate and follow through the next 4 steps. The second thing is, I want you to start with feeling, right? Because if you can't, everything that we want to make physically manifest in our life, the holidays, the cars, the clothes, the experiences, those physical manifestations are actually, it's a coating for a feeling that we want to have. So one of the questions I want you to ask is, what does that give me? What does that thing give me? So here's 2 ways to do that. The first thing is, I want you to just sit down with a piece of pen and paper and think about, like, if I could wave a magic wand for you and you had the most perfect life, what would that look like? And start to write that down. From the minute you wake up in the morning, what do you do with your children? Where do you have your breakfast? What kind of business are you working? Who are you talking to? How are you behaving? And I know if this is the beginning of your journey and all your limiting beliefs are already saying, don't be so silly, just go with it. Imagine you're writing yourself a novel, right? Please, this is really important. As you've finished that off, take a pen and change the color and start to highlight where the emotion words are, or what you're actually feeling in that space, and see the commonalities. You're going to find probably 2 or 3 words that come up over and over again in that story. So activate the story and then get really clear on what are the emotions that are so important to me in that story. The other way around it, if that's challenging for you, is to write down the list of things first, and then say, what does that thing give me? Emotionally, what does that thing give me? I'll use money as an example. So when people write down, I want to get out of debt, that's not a really good way to action our goals. For some, it will be. That negative push is enough for some people. But I like to try and promote people, if they can, to come into positive motivation. So what does having no credit card debt give to me? Well, I feel better. Well, what do you mean by that? Explain that. What does that give to me? Well, I feel like I can breathe. Okay, what else does that feel like? If you could explain that in another word, what would that feel like? Safe. Oh, so secure. Yeah. And is there anything else that security gives you? Freedom. Right? So don't just take the first words that come to mind, just dig a little bit deeper. Another thing that I do with my clients is I ask them to go buy some magazines that they like and flip through the magazines and cut out pictures of things that they are attracted to, put them out in front of them and write down what feelings came up for me when I looked at those pictures, right? So we're activating the feeling state first. Everything you want physically is a physical cover manifestation of a feeling that you want to have. And here's the thing, we're not going to talk about this today, but very briefly, if you can activate those feelings on a daily basis, you align yourself energetically with a bigger outcome for those things to be in your life all of the time. The third thing is, I want you to write out your desires and use pictures, and I want you to look at them every single day. We call this future orientation. Lots of us don't spend enough time thinking about that or sitting in the energy of this future vision. We're often trapped in the to-dos of today, the lacks of today, the what's got to happen today. And we forget to align energetically. So I like to ask my client to do this a couple of times, maybe 3 times a day, more if they want. But you can read through your list. You can read the story. I'm somebody that likes to write it out over and over again, because as I write, I'm connected in my heart center. I will also look at the pictures that I've got in my scrapbook. And here's one other top tip. When you're writing things out, put this or something better, right? Because remember, we talked about when you're in that feeling state, universe, infinite intelligence has way more amazing outcomes than you can consciously think about. So this or something better. And be sure to check in with that a minimum of once a day. And the best time to do that is like when you've just woken up, when you're in a meditative state, or when just before you go to sleep, because your brain waves are in a much better state for you to take that information in. The fourth thing I really need you to do is to set the pace. Lots of people will say to me, lots of clients, I'm not making enough progress. And I say, well, how are you measuring that progress? And they'll go, well, I'm just not getting stuff done. Okay, but what pace did you set? How many YouTube videos did you want to do a week? How many posts on social media did you want to do? How much content for your course did you want to create? How many clients do you want to attract this month? How much money you want to make in this quarter? You have to set the pace. If you do not set the pace, you have no concept of whether you're on track or not. So this is where we start to bring in more of the logic and the strategy, because once you get the strategy with the heart center, now you're winning. Now you're in the winning game. So set the pace and get clear on what does the progress look like for you on the things that you're working on. The final aspect is, if you're going to effectively goal set, you've now set the pace, you have to have an action plan in place to make that happen. You don't need to know the whole 5 years. You don't even necessarily need to know the whole year, but you 100% need to know that the minimum of the next month, I would suggest that you have an outline plan for at least the next 3 months. And you just look at what are the key areas that I'm focusing on and break that down into action steps every day. Now, remember, when you do your scheduling, please check out the next video that I'm going to link to this one, because I'm going to talk to you about how to schedule effectively and to get the most out of your work. But when you schedule your time, in your schedule, you're going to have your time to check in with your visualizations and to write out your goals and to look at your vision pictures and to think about the future orientation. That's non-negotiable. What happens here is, though, we get pulled into some subconscious programs about having to work, having to be logical, having to do things a certain way. And we miss out on this magical heart-centered stuff, which will never guide us wrong. It will give us the answers that we're looking for. It will guide us on the right pathways. But so many people get sucked back up into the head, because that's where most of us are trained to be all of our lives, and we have to really break free from that conditioning. So make yourself an action plan, 12 weeks, keep the thing, right? So make sure you're not trying to multitask, you haven't got a gazillion things on your plate at once. Pick 1 or 2 primary areas of focus and just work on those. I hope this has made sense to you. Is an absolute game changer. Get rid of the SMART goals, start thinking about activating different areas, different feelings for yourself, get into future orientation. And if you want to know more about how to increase your productivity, be sure to check on the next video, which I've uploaded next to me right here. And I'll see you next time. You can get more done if you do less. But most people think that productivity is all about output and time. And if you keep functioning from that place of productivity, you're going to find yourself left behind, tired, and exhausted. Today, I want to share with you 3 big ideas about how you can 10x your productivity